Jesus entered a village where a woman whose name was Martha welcomed him. She had a sister named Mary who sat beside the Lord at his feet, listening to him speak. Martha, burdened with much serving, came to him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me by myself to do the serving? Tell her to help me." The Lord said to her in reply, "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and worried about many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, and it will not be taken from her." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
This weekend and last Sunday's Gospel is called by scripture scholars Luke's special section. It's not in any of the other Gospels, and that means then that we only get to hear the story of the Good Samaritan last weekend and Martha and Mary's hospitality only once every 3 years on a Sunday. It's too bad. It's too bad because, at least for me, I could use a lot of reminders of these two stories on a regular basis, maybe once a month or so. So there's two aspects that I'd like to address in this homily today. So as we listen to this particular story, it's important to understand that although our translation says that Mary chose the better, St. Luke actually is saying that Mary has chosen the good part. Mary has chosen the good part. And I think that means that there's always more to it. There's more to it for Jesus and more to it with Jesus. And so that's because when you put that in conjunction with last week's story of the Good Samaritan, it would seem unthinkable to suggest that preaching or studying the Word, knowing all the rules, takes absolute priority over direct service, which, if you remember from last Sunday, we're told, "Go and do likewise." And I always like to often say at Mass, at the end of the Mass, it's very clear. We've had the reading of the Word, the celebration of the Eucharist, Holy Communion, but the last words are, which is where the wet Mass comes from, "Go and leave here, go and serve the Lord." In other words, get out of here. Get out of here and try to live what we just celebrated in Mass. So we should notice then, if that's the case, that in this story, both Martha and Mary step out of the usual traditional roles of women at the time of Jesus. Martha's service is described literally as diaconal. That means she was serving, just as Jesus was serving. And Mary was sitting, literally, at the feet of her rabbi, a physical position and a role that's traditionally restricted to men. Interesting, when you think about all of these stories in the various Gospels of Jesus coming as a guest or being at a table to share a meal, in almost all of those Gospel situations, there's always some sort of conflict in some way or another. Maybe sometimes, at your table at home, sometimes there's, little areas of conflict about different things. Well, for Jesus, it's the same thing. So he consistently stretched the acceptable limits of his time. He scandalized many of his contemporaries because he ignored the rules that restricted anyone's full participation in God's reign. According to Jesus, that reign resembles as a banquet, as lavishly as we hear in the first reading today from Genesis, no matter who it was. no matter their social or political or physical or religious stature and status. So today, as we come together for Mass, if we want to enjoy the company of Christ, we need to find a balance between action and contemplation. And at the same time, this will allow us to join in Jesus' rejection of roles and rules and regulations that demean or diminish others. Whenever Jesus came to a house, he became, well, the host, just like we have the host at every Mass with us. And then he provides a place at his table for everyone, saints and sinners, all of us together alike. The only requirement, though, for a holy communion with Jesus is acceptance of others that he also invites. So we choose the good part when we enjoy his open banquet, even if, like Martha, we're questioning or frustrated that others are in the same room with him and with us. The second part of my reflection today is this. I love the story of Martha because she reminds me of someone I know, me. Maybe it's no coincidence that I spent 16 and a half years out of 41 so far at nearby St. Martha's Parish in Uniondale. So just think about it. She had Jesus right there, right in her home, but she had so many distractions and preoccupations and anxieties and diversions and interruptions that interfered with the magnitude and the opportunity of capitalizing on Jesus being right with her at the time. Maybe you too. Interesting, as I noticed in the first reading, in the opening song today, all are welcome. And so God is welcome into our lives, as we are here today, but sometimes the welcome, we disappear in that welcoming. Sometimes we can get very distracted, even as a priest, during Mass. And so God is always welcoming us and wanting to be there for us if we are paying attention. I thought about this a lot over the past 3 months since I was in an accident and later had a seizure and a stroke as a result of it. My brother-in-law, who was driving the car, is miraculously doing much better, and he's going home this week. And when I spoke to him on FaceTime the other day down in Florida, he said, 3 months ago, we were in the wrong place at the wrong time. But he went on to say, but God was in the right place at the right time. And it made me think about that a lot, God's always accompanying us. But sometimes, like Martha, we can get so distracted anywhere, even in church, anywhere, and we can forget that God is with us. I know that God is trying to get greater attention from me by transforming that experience of the accident into new life. The pastor of my brother-in-law's parish in Florida wants him to speak at a prayer service when he gets back home, describing not just the accident, but the realization of God with him, God with us, God with all of us, and during and through the ordeals of life, the meals, the accidents, the good and the bad, to thick and thin. And I think he's going to do that. For me, I've been more like Martha, going back to the kitchen and not as reflective enough on the magnitude of Jesus being right here and asking me to consider not just surviving the accident, but the implications of God always being in the right place at the right time. And so I think the message, one of the important messages of today is to pay attention. All are welcome, but sometimes we get distracted, even in the welcoming. So for me, I'd like to end this homily by playing a 5-second reminder of why this particular gospel passage is important to me and maybe to you. If your life, if your schedule, if your mailbox is too filled to answer a call from Jesus when Jesus is calling us. And perhaps you've gotten this message in the past. I hate when I get it, especially from when I'm calling family and friends, when I'm trying to reach somebody. And I wonder how Jesus feels when he gets this response from you or me.
The mailbox is full. I cannot accept any messages at this time. Goodbye.
Too busy? Too burdened with much serving, the words of the gospel? Too anxious and worried about too many things? Goodbye. Goodbye, Jesus, even though you are welcoming and waiting for me. So maybe it's good to think about that message that perhaps got annoyed at, and maybe when we get that message to Jesus, the mailbox is full and cannot accept any messages at this time. Goodbye. Let's welcome him and say hello once again.